like that. So probably an easy way to show this would be, I'm just going to grab a sphere and talk a little bit about a way that you can align motion to a spline. So this is super helpful for a lot of different things. I'm just going to take a sphere. I'm going to, what I want this to do is just to simply go around in a circle. And I want that to be a continuous loop so that it continues on. So what I'll do here is I'm going to grab an object that I want to follow a spline, and I'm going to bring in a circle spline. And then with the spline, I'm going to change the plane to the Z and the X. That way it's laying flat down. And then what you can do is on the sphere, you can go up to tags and animation tags, and there's this thing called align to spline. So that's a tag you put on the object you want to follow the path of a spline, and it can be one that you draw, it can be a shape that you make, or it can be a prefab form like a circle or any other thing. So what you'll do here is on the tag itself, you've got to choose a spline path. So you can click on the spline you want and drag it down here, or you can also click on this little arrow and then click on the spline that you want to pull into it. So what that does automatically is it puts the object on at the wherever the middle of that axis is, it puts it on that on the spline. And then the way that you animate it is via the position. So the position is going to make it go around that sort of shape and form. All right. So what we would do here is we'd go back to 0 on our timeline, turn on auto keyframe, go to position in the tag, click that on. When you click that little red dot on, it's going to automatically pop in a keyframe for you at 0. And then I'm just going to move forward, and ideally we would want to change this to 100%, right? And that then would allow this to follow that spline going all the way around, right? Now, one thing you notice is that it stops, right? It goes around and it stops and then it starts again. So if we wanted continuous motion, what we'd want to do is actually on the last one, we don't really want it to be 100%, right? Because that's completing the full revolution back to its original point. So if you think about it, that's actually putting 2 keyframes in the same exact spot. So that's why it's staying still for just that little bit of a second, right? So position, instead, if we do 99, that's going to put you at the position right before the start position, which would then complete the cycle, right? So if we do that and we go back, then we can watch this and it should just continue to go, right? So it's kind of like continuing to go through and, following through that motion. The other thing is that it's automatically when you create this sort of animation, turn the auto keyframes off here. Let's go to our animation mode. And if we look at this in the F curves, you can see there's this slope, right? And so with a curve in this sort of F curve, then it's going to start out kind of relatively slow, and then it's going to ramp up fast, and then it's going to slow back out again. So that's why you're getting that motion of it kind of like starting slow, speeding up, and then slowing back down again. If you wanted continuous, even motion, what you can do is when you're in this F curve mode, you can click this little one here, which is a linear, right? So it's going to take these curves and it's going to straighten them out. So we click on that. Then notice now from 0 to 90, we have one continuous straight line. There are no curves. And so now what we should have is a continuous motion that's going the same speed around and around and around. And because we keyframed our position along the spline to 99 instead of 100, now we have, that nice, even kind of continuous motion. So, and this could be something that we could copy and paste keyframes and have go around and around and around and just sort of continue that form. So a couple of things here. Again, the align to spline is a really helpful way to create a consistent motion or animation as you're going through, and that can give you a great way to to have some control over how you move your objects throughout a scene. And certainly you could, draw that as well. You could draw a path. You could have it follow a shape of any sort of thing like that, which can be really, really helpful. All right. The other thing that we mentioned today when we looked at David's animation, he was doing a light that followed an object, which I think is really cool. And there's a few different ways to do that. But one way, that you could consider would be a target light, right? And so a target light, what it's going to do is it is going to create a light and then also create a target. And the target is going to follow, the light is going to follow the target no matter where that goes. So if we start at our 0 frame, right, and we move this target directly in the middle of our sphere, okay, something like that, it's pretty good. We can actually put the light inside the sphere. So that's going to become a child of the sphere, right? So ultimately it's going to move with the movement of the sphere. And because the sphere has keyframes, then the target should follow as well. So if we play this now, notice that the light is following the sphere. So that's a cool way that you can have this sort of spot-like effect, something that follows. Another thing is to have it be a child of that object. So it's going to follow that no matter where it goes. The last thing, well, I mean, I could just keep going with this, but I'll open it up for questions and stuff as we go forward. But one more important thing that I wanted to talk about with this is the idea of animating cameras, right? So we've talked a lot about animating objects through their scale, proportion, through their movement and through their rotation, right? And we've also, talked about deformers and other ways of creating that movement. But another thing that can be really interesting is to have the camera move in and of itself as well. So what you can do is a camera, if you bring in any sort of normal camera, a camera can be animated just like any other object. Now, the key with animating a camera is that you have to be looking through the camera, right? And you have to change, either the position or the focal range or anything like that as you go through. So right now, I have a camera and we're looking through the camera. And if we zoom out over the aerial view, we can see the positioning of that. And just like any other object, we can animate the position of the camera. So I'm just going to click on auto keyframe. I'm just going to click the first keyframe in here. I'm just going to click the manual keyframe button. It's going to record the position of the camera. And then as I move forward in the timeline to 90, let's say, I can move the camera in and we're zooming in on the object. Maybe I'll move it over just a little bit so it stays centered. Maybe I'll move it down a little bit, ever so slightly. There we go. Okay, and now what I have is the rotation of the object. Oh, I got to be on my window that I want here. Here we go. Let's turn auto keyframes off. So we start out from afar, and then we're zooming in on the object altogether, right? So that in and of itself can be a great way to further the depth of your animations, to make them more interesting, to think about staging and positioning, and any other thing that can happen with the camera, with any of the objects can happen with the camera. So you can rotate it, you can change the scale. That's going to affect different things. And then what I often will do as well is allow a camera to follow a spline as well. So the same way that we did the align to spline with the object, you could also do with the camera. So if you wanted the camera, for example, to move around an object, like imagine a drone shot, circling a building, right? You could create that spline and then have the camera follow that object.